It's funny, you're looking even taller than me, like on the podcast. I don't know how that's possible. Normally it's like an equalizer, but actually, I need to put my chair up a little bit.
I am like, yeah. I put mine down. Does that work?
How's it going, man? It's been a while.
Yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, it's going really well. Thanks very much.
Oh shit! The sound completely cut out then for a second.
I can hear you. I should have quite a good connection now.
Might be Brexit. They're not letting the data out.
It's probably. I have to pay extra tax on the data to you. Wouldn't surprise me. And yeah, it's held up at customs as well. So they're just checking the picture.
To start with, can you just give our listeners like an abbreviated version of yourself, like the LinkedIn bullet points, like your background, career progression, and what you're doing now for those who don't know?
Yeah, cool. Started working in retail all my life since leaving college. Didn't really know what to do. Studied computers and business at college. Left, went and worked in a retail environment. After that, went and worked in another retail environment for Apple for about 8 years in the city of London. Did various different roles there and kind of thought, I don't know, hit the age of like 35, 36, 37, thought maybe there's something else out there that I can challenge myself to do. E-bikes came along in 2018. I had the first go on an e-bike in 2018. Thought this is amazing and thought, okay, well, there's something in this. I'm going to start an e-bike community and left my role in a good job. And everyone thought I was mad because I was leaving a good job to go and be a YouTuber, which is something I don't know. It's just a bit nuts when you think of it.
The kids love it. That's actually my kid's dream job.
Is it? Yeah. I think it is for a lot of kids. Like my daughter is really, she thinks it's a bit like cringy that I do it. When her mates at school say, I subscribe to your dad's channel, it's really good.
They like and subscribe to her dad.
That's out. You got to build up your likes and subs, dude.
So, okay, look, so, I mean, working for Apple, that's actually the dream job for a lot of people. What lessons have you learned when working at Apple that, could be applied to the bike industry?
I think there's different aspects of it. So I think just if we look at the product itself and the way that Apple even showcase a product in store, from the angles that the laptops have to be displayed at, that encourages people to want to go and touch it and tilt the screen. Very, very minor things like that you would never think about, to dealing with people. We had big teams. Some of the stores, the one that I worked in, had over 500 employees in one store. So I think there's lots of different aspects it touches on, from the technology side, the merchandising, the marketing side, but also working with people and working with big teams of people. So I think that a lot of my influences in how I try and showcase product has been taken from my career at Apple and sweating the details with showcasing product. I think that I'd like to think that I took some of that learning and it kind of developed into my own style, but I've got some of those influences that I learned way back there. Yeah, man, it's a really good company to work for. And, there's just the pace of innovation there is pretty nuts. But at the same time, they're a company that keeps things really simple. If you look at their product portfolio, they don't sell that many different things: phone, iPad, computer, headphones. There's new stuff coming in the future that looks really cool. So it's just all of that stuff could be quite complex, but how do you keep that quite simple as well? So
I heard an interesting quote about Apple recently, which is that the space that an object is given, it pours into the value of the object itself. Like the reason that Apple makes lots of space around their products in the store is because real estate is expensive. So by giving a product space, it adds value to the product itself. Definitely some lessons there for bike shops where they kind of cram everything in.
Actually, I've seen bike shops doing really good in that regard. There's two that I've been to recently. Propane have got a cool showroom near the Surrey Hills, and they have a similar kind of setup. So there's not many bikes. Well, there are quite a few bikes in there, but they've got this huge stand that you can get all around the bike and look at it and examine the suspension layout. And you get a really good understanding for it, versus somewhere like a big box store just calling out Decathlon that have them all in a row, they're up on racks and you can't even get anywhere near them. Two totally different buying experiences for sure. But Propane do it really well, YT do it really well as well. And I say those companies because they're just local to me. I'm sure there's loads of other examples out there, but I see some of those influences moving across to the bike industry.
It's sort of counterintuitive. Like you think, oh, we'll make more money if you have more products in the store and you stack them all up because there's more choice for the consumer. But actually, yeah, Apple kind of proves the opposite is true.
Yeah. So if you go to the Apple store in Regent Street, I think the front of the store has maybe 12 tables and the amount of product out there is quite minimal. But you go in there and you feel like you're in this grand space. Just the architecture of the building's amazing, and all of that thought that goes into how can we best showcase these products, right down to the lighting, the temperature of the lighting, the size of the tiles on the floor, the wood, the grain of the wood, how it's polished. All of those subconsciously filter into your mind, and you don't know it, but all of a sudden you're in this really nice environment that means that you don't feel I mean, it's a busy place, that store in London, but you feel like it's a nice place to be and take a look at the technology that they're selling.
Could you say something about their pricing policy?
In what regard?
So how do they differentiate? Because they have so few products. Like, how do they then, what's their pricing strategy? If you look at like an eMountain bike, for example, they'd have 8 variations of the same model from increments of 250 euros up. Is that really necessary? Maybe you just need a expensive mid-price and entry-level model.
Yeah, I think there's always a call to do that good, better, and best, isn't there? Because you've got the entry level, and then the next one up is maybe a couple of $100 more, but you get double the amount of storage, and it just, I think. Yeah, I can't talk too much about that because I wasn't really involved in that side. But I think that if I was to, for the iPhone 15 Pro, for example, that's just come out, I think that if you're purchasing that one, it's a premium handset. It's a really premium phone. But I would say that most people are not going to get that base one. They're not going to get the top one, but their pricing structure is set. So the middle one is a really interesting proposition.
I need the top one.
You need the top one, right? So you need
Max.
Everything. Pro Max. So that's what I got, but I didn't. Yeah. But I think it's smart. The pricing strategy is super smart.
If Apple made an e-bike, what would they do that the current brands are not doing?
I think that the learning curve to get on it and ride it would be minimal. I think if a 6-year-old should be able to get on it and understand it fully, and a 96-year-old should be able to get on it and understand it fully. And there should be zero barrier to entry. There should be all the buttons and controls and UI should be so intuitive that you don't even have to question what it is. And it will be very, very simple. And simple is not easy. Simple is actually very complex to deliver something simple. And I think Apple are great at that. Phones don't come with user manuals, or computers don't come with user manuals. And I think Apple were the people that kind of pioneered that. Whereas like even now for me, and I consider myself somebody that's fairly proficient with understanding bikes, to get my Garmin to connect to the bike, I have to go through this funky kind of process of trial and error. And on some bikes it works and some bikes it doesn't. And the language used in it is really strange. And on the screen comes up with I don't know, it's just not, it can be much better than it is, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I completely agree with you. I think that there are also currently quite a lot of barriers to doing that. I mean, the best example of a bicycle brand trying to do what Apple's done is Van Moof, and they've just gone insolvent and actually ended up losing some incredible sum of like 700 euros per bike sold due to quality issues. Like they would try to like in-house the design and of everything. So, and then something goes wrong, they have to replace it themselves. So yeah, but it's a very simple product. You get on it and go, so they did try to do that, but the fact that they didn't do it doesn't mean that it's not the right way forward. So,
I think a bicycle is so different because everyone in the on every component in a bicycle and all the brands behind it are so interdependent on each other. When you just whittle it right down to what is a bike brand, so what is High Bike, what is Specialized, what is Trek, what do they make? Well, you can get it right down to this rudimental part of it. Actually, is a triangle, and
you're about to pull
I know
back
it's
the
way
curtain
more.
here.
I know it's way more complex than that, and I'm doing many people that work in the industry a disservice here.
No,
But
I think you're
what I
actually
mean by
spot
that,
on.
what I mean by that is a bicycle company is a frame, and there's a lot of marketing and engineering that goes on to building the frame and bringing it to market, and a lot of stuff in the background that I don't see that happens with purchasing and logistics that I know is very complex. But everything is interdependent on one another. So Shimano can't exist without bike frames, really. Whereas Apple or somebody like Tesla in the automotive industry design and manufacture, well, they don't manufacture everything, but they manufacture and design way more, a much higher proportion of the end product compared to a bicycle company. So I think it has its different levels of complexity.
Well, what is your view on the bike industry at the moment?
Well, I think it went through a massive period of growth during COVID, and I think that was much needed. I think before COVID, it was difficult. It was very challenging, and I think COVID gave a lot of people within the industry a real much needed boost. I think now it's actually really challenging. I'm not massively into, or I'm not hugely educated on the business side behind a lot of the brands, but from what I see and read, and certainly from what I can see on things like the forum, like eMTB forums, as an end consumer, what you see right now is incredible deals on bicycles. So half price is a real buyer's market right now. So I'm thinking back from that. Well, okay, so somebody's bought a lot of bicycles that need to be sold, and you kind of join those dots backwards. You can see probably 24 months ago, when we might have been just coming out of COVID or maybe mid-COVID, that a lot of the brands were ordering massive amounts of stock. Factories were probably overrun and delayed, and now all that stock's being delivered. And a lot of brands have got 22 and 23 model year stock that they're trying to get rid of before model year 24 kicks in, which is like now, really. So I think it's a really tough time, man. Like you just called out Van Moof. I think Gorilla Gravity, I read recently, there's a few brands that I think will find the next 12 to 18 months really, really tough. Not just bike brands, but all the knock-on with that as well, bike shops and, media such as myself, potentially. So, yeah, I think it's a really tough environment.
Going back to you and your journey, so what was kind of the catalyst, and was there a particular moment when you thought, okay, I want to make e-mountain bike content? I want to be a e-mountain bike YouTuber?
Yeah, I don't know exactly when that was, really, because we bought an e-mountain bike for my wife because she doesn't really like cycling and I do. And I had a regular pedal bike and thought maybe we buy an e-bike for the family and, she'll enjoy it more. She likes walking and hiking way more than bike riding. But it turned out that I enjoyed it way more than she did. And I rode it like 95% of the time. And at that point, it's certainly in the UK, there was no English speaking websites that I could find any information from about this bike. And I thought, oh, it's quite weird. It seems like a really cool product. It mixes the things that I'm really interested in, biking and technology. I really was fascinated by how they'd brought that together. And I thought there's hardly any info. I think the UK was way behind the rest of Europe in the adoption. And there were some German-speaking sites and reviews and that kind of thing. And I thought, well, I'll try and create my own. I can't find anything, so let's build in websites is not too complex, and I had some experience in doing it. So I thought, well, okay, so let's try and get some people on this site, because there's going to be more people like me, sure, that have gone and bought a bike or interested in one that want to find info. So I started that website in maybe, I don't know, the start of 2018. And I thought, right, how can I get people to know that it's there? And I didn't really want to spend any money on advertising or AdSense because it just costs a fortune. So I thought, okay, I'll start a YouTube channel. That's the way to do it. And I think my first video, I didn't even have a GoPro or anything. I literally strapped an iPhone to my chest and did a video and just rode around the forest. It's not a good video, so don't go back and watch it. It's really bad.
The iPhone is great for filming, though. I made a bunch of videos with Highbike back in the day with Guido Chug, and I had the iPhone on a gimbal. And the videos are like, I'm still pretty stoked when I look at them now. So it can work.
They're amazing. They're fantastic. Even like the new one, the log quality is amazing. Anyway, so I started the YouTube, started doing those in order to try and get people to go over to the website.
The website is eMTB forums you're talking about. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And it turned out that the YouTube grew like way quicker than the website, and people were more interested in that. And I think that was a reflection of the changing media landscape at the time. People are getting more into video. And then I think I did a video on the Levo. Like I just did a walk around, a first look at the Levo Carbon, the first one that had the integrated battery, and it looked really slick. And I think it had like, I don't know, 30,000 views. I was like, well, that's pretty good. What about if I do one on the Kenevo? And that had, I don't know what the views were, but I thought I can try and replicate this and grow the YouTube and grow the site. And after about, I would say 18 months to 24 months of doing that, I started to earn a little bit of revenue from the YouTube and the forum. Not a lot, but a little bit. And at the time, my wife still is, but she also works for Apple, and she travels abroad a lot. And we had young kids, and we were both working away. I was in London. She was traveling a lot. So anyway, to cut a long story short, I decided to take a bit of a punt and drew the lucky straw that I could try and do something different. And if it didn't work, I had a promise note from my boss that I could go back, which was really cool. So I thought, I'll give it 6 months. Worst case is I'll take it on the chin. It didn't work. I'll go back to Apple and things will be fine.
That's amazing. You literally had nothing to lose. Only upside.
Yeah. Well, that's what I thought. I thought like, there's not a lot to lose. So let's give it a go. And I think a lot of it came down to right place and right time and a bit of luck, because at that time, 2019, 2020, a few years ago, I think that's when we saw a real big leap of new product coming from pretty much every single brand to bring e-bikes to market. So it lent itself to what I was doing.
What's your number one video to date?
Full length video. I don't know. It might. I tell you what. It's probably the DIY e-bikes.
Really?
I bought. There's a couple that I think are pretty good. I can't remember without looking, but I think the Mega Avalanche one has done pretty well. Do you remember when we went and did the Mega Avalanche?
Yeah, on the fly.
Yeah, because I got the high bike fly on.
Sliding down the mountain as well. There's some quite good clips from that.
Yeah, I was just sliding on my arse down the mountain, down a glacier. And I think the title was "Can an Amateur Do the Mega Avalanche?" and it was a picture. The thumbnail was me sliding down the glacier on my backside.
That was crazy, that slope.
Yeah,
I remember sliding down there as well.
That one did well. And I think the DIY one did well. That did like 1 million, I think.
What do you think it is that appeals to people about DIY bikes?
I think there's a bit of curiosity there, because it was a DIY e-bike. So there's the DIY piece. There's I bought a cheap Chinese frame, or a frame from the Far East. And I think there's always been a bit of curiosity between, if I buy a product, could I do it myself? And could I save a lot of money? So there was a few things in there. I think it was a DIY e-bike that there's not a lot. There's the kind of big bolt-on motor style of DIY e-bikes, but this was like a mid-drive integrated battery, and it was buying a carbon fiber frame for $650 and trying to replicate something that you could do at your own leisure in your own garage, and you maybe would pay a fraction of the cost that it would cost you to get a bike from a reputable company. So I think there was a bit of curiosity there.
So what feedback have you learned from your viewers, from their comments about how well their product expectations align with what the industry is selling?
there's so much feedback on every single video, and I think if I could call out some of the most common themes, I think is the cost of e-bikes. I think that's one of the biggest. If I could bucket comments, I think the biggest feedback piece to brands would be the cost and the value for money piece. And then, comparing it, so you can get a KTM for €6,000, or you can get a top end e-bike for €12,000. I could buy 2 KTMs for the price of that. And I think that's it's still a big theme.
Do you think people understand why, you can get a bike for 12,000 and kind of the same model for 6,000? Do people realize how much of the value is actually kind of accrued to the supplier rather than the brand? Or do they kind of blame the brands for being greedy?
I think so. I think the latter. I think the latter is one of those more common conceptions, because I think that if people maybe did understand that it wouldn't be a comment that was left so much, I guess. I think some of that also comes from a frustration that these products are so good and people really want them, but maybe they are out of a price range that it doesn't sit within that affordability or that rational product purchase. Because we're talking like, some of the top end e-bikes, certainly the price is reducing now, but were maybe 12, 13,000, and they're really good, man. They're really good bikes, but that's a lot of money, isn't it?
It is. I mean, what's the average salary in the UK? It's £33,000. And if you think that, and that's gross, I guess. So it's not leaving a lot for, a £10,000 bike. That's definitely
it's a lot of it's a big discretionary purchase, isn't it? So, but on the flip side, I think that now we're seeing really reasonable pricing coming along, and I'm interested to find out over the next few years how this will affect the industry. So Vitus have just brought out a bike, and it's got the same, funnily enough, it's got that same Bafang motor that was in the e-bike that I did as a DIY build, just the next generation of it. So it's using the Bafang motor. And the bike that I rode was £3,799. But within like 2 weeks of it being released, they had a 30% off sale.
Wow.
So you could get it for £2,800. And this was for like a full-on enduro e-bike.
What did your one cost to build?
Like £4,000.
You went for high-end, you went for SRAM, did you? And like high-end
yeah,
SRAM
I did.
stuff.
Exactly. It had Zeb forks on it. It had like DT switch. It was really like not top end, but high end, pretty much everything. So that's going to be interesting to see how that kind of that entry level side develops. I think at the end of the day, consumers are getting much more bike for a much lower price.
It's hard to go back to kind of like a cable push gearing, though. I find after using Axis, I'm definitely spoiled with my current bike. It's just full Axis everything, perfect electronic shifting, perfect electronic dropper, and it's so amazing to use. Can you briefly walk us through like the steps you take from conceptualization to a final edit for some of your videos?
So it depends on the content, but let me give you an example of a bike video, which is a classic thing that I'll do on my channel. So a brand releases a new video, a new bike, and the video will come out on my channel. So if we work back from that, what happens is the brand will contact me maybe 3 months in advance and say, "Hey Rob, we've got this new e-bike coming out. We'd love to do a feature on your channel." So I'll go through kind of how that works. So usually they send the bike to me. I have it for about 4 weeks roughly. Before the launch date, sometimes a bit longer, sometimes it can be a bit shorter depending on lead time, and I will go ride it, get it set up, do the suspension, all that stuff to make sure it feels good, and then we film one of those edits for about 4 days roughly. And when you work it out, when you add all the hours up that it takes to produce one 12-minute video, it's about 100 hours.
Wow.
of like work. And by that I mean driving to the destination, filming, editing, all of that kind of stuff. So it's pretty nuts really how long it actually takes. But that's what I kind of feel personally, that I want to try and capture the best footage. So when I make the video, it can look as as nice as possible, really. So yeah, so we normally film for about 3 to 4 days, depending on time of year, depending on weather. In the summer, you get much longer light. In the winter, you've got like 4 hours of light. And then sometimes I'll go out and get maybe some drone footage separately to that, and some GoPro footage. And then I start with the edit, and then it's just like you've just got a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle that's been shook up and just chucked everywhere, and it's like, how do you put it back together and make it look like a picture?
Do you storyboard it, or you just kind of you have something in mind already? You just visualize it internally?
Yeah, I kind of visualize it internally, and the pattern is I always try and find some music or a beat that I can put down first, and that is like my motivator to create images to go to the music. And it's really weird, and I didn't really realize it for quite some time, but it takes me ages and ages to find the right track. And yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? And it's one of those things that probably no one notices when they watch it, but the audio that is in that video might have taken me half a day to find. And then when I find the right track, I use a service called Epidemic Sound, and then you can download the individual stems of that track. So there'll be like bass, instruments, melody, voice, and then I'll strip it down and maybe use 2 of those, and then I'll lay down that bed, and then I'll start creating an edit to that, and I'll kind of build it in blocks. So there'll be a structure to it. So there'll be an intro, a bit of a riding footage, a bit of hero shots on the bike, and then a bit more riding, a bit of climbing, a bit on the tech, and then a bit of a wrap up. So they do follow a similar structure. And I think that's important because, first of all, it helps you build it. And second of all, it adds a bit of familiarity and structure to the audience. So I think when they've watched, maybe if they've watched 3 or 4, they'll know what they're going to get roughly for video 5 or 6 that they watch.
Yeah, you have a pretty consistent style. Are there any other YouTubers who've influenced you in your journey, and what have you learned from them?
Yeah, I watch a lot of the tech YouTubers. Actually, there's one guy called Marquez Brownlee, MKBHD, who does really good tech reviews, camera reviews. Yeah, and obviously, like, you look at a lot of the amazing bike edits that are out there. There's some people doing some amazing work, and you think, wow, look at how they've filmed that, how they've shot that bike, how that guy's doing that corner. And there's always things that you're noticing that you think, or I certainly think, oh, I'd love to be able to get a shot that looks like that. And I'm not the best rider in the world. I'm just like very average. I can't do tricks or anything like that.
You've got way better. So I remember the first time I rode with you to the last time I rode with you, your speed increased you like doubled in speed.
Thanks. Yeah, that's why I hate going and watching the old videos, because it just makes me like cringe. But it is what it is. I try and get better all the time, and I think that if I can hit a level that is just good enough to showcase a bike that most people will be able to ride at, like, the level doesn't need to be elite or world class, I don't think, anyway. That's what I tell myself.
You can just do really good enough slow to be able to, and then lots of tight cuts.
Oh yeah. You've noticed my style then?
I've done similar stuff myself. So. What one piece of advice or wisdom could you share with listeners who considering setting off on their own to create their own company or YouTube channel, but struggling with some doubts about doing so?
Yeah, it's I think with YouTube, there's so many amazing genres of YouTube and niches that could be replicated with what I do. E-bike, it can be, I don't know, lawnmowers or pencils for design, or there's so many different niches. And I think you might hear this a lot, but the biggest advice that I hear and I might give is that it has to be something that's a passion of yours, unless you've got a really solid business case and you are certain it's going to make money, or the risk is low if you're going to go and start doing something like that full time. I would say it has to be a passion first, and then if it can turn into a business, then that's amazing. But it's hard, man. It's not easy. It's not easy to do it and make a good living. I don't think. I think on YouTube, for every, I don't know how many people have channels, but the amount that make it over 1,000 subscribers is absolutely minuscule. But I think when it comes to business, is understanding a bit more about profit, loss, tax, corporation tax, all those boring things that I didn't think about at all, but actually make a real big impact to your bottom line. Like, I didn't know you have to pay X amount of corporation tax when, all of those things that you don't get taught at school. You just kind of have to find out.
I read recently that 90% of podcasts don't get over episode 3. So we're already in the top 10th percentile. So doing quite well. I think this is episode number 5. So we're on a good roll.
Oh, there you go. There you go. You're over that 3 hurdle.
Exactly.
No, it's yeah.
It's it's still very. I'm probably going to cringe when I look back on these as well. So I've also got a lot of work to do. But yeah. So all right, now for a bit of a wild card question. So let's imagine there's a zombie apocalypse. Your only escape is on an eMountain bike. What bike are you going to take?
Just the closest to me, or the one that's the fastest. Not the SL, because that's not the fastest. I've got I just take like the Bosch powered, big battery, massive wheels, big travel, so I can just smash over anything at race pace. Yeah, big travel brawler.
That's probably a good time to talk about your kind of preferred kind of bike. I mean, I know, having spoken to you before, like, there's many different categories of bike, maybe especially eMountain bike. Maybe you could just comment a little bit on what the different categories are as you see them and what your favorite category is.
Okay, so obviously you can just crudely separate them into lightweight and full power, but then there's definitely different categories within that. So I think like the super light is like an SL that weighs 16 kilos. And it's a bit more of like for me, it's a bit more of like an XC style trail bike. The tires are kind of thin and they're good for a certain purpose, but they do have limitations as soon as you start pushing those really lightweight bikes.
Do you think a lightweight category is more suited then to a shorter travel, like more trail focused bike rather than a long travel bike?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that what we'll see is maybe people that do prefer a bit more of an XC trail ride, the lightweight bikes potentially might be a better option for people. But then there's the like burlier lightweight bikes that start to hit like 18.5, 19 kilos. So I built up a Trek Fuel EXE with a 170 travel fork, and like I put in the wrong size shock, so it made it like 170, 160. And it rode really well, but it was like 19.3 kilos with a small motor and a small battery. And then you can get something like a full power, I don't know, Orbea Wilds for 21 kilos. And it's got twice the battery and twice the power. And actually going down, the Orbea Wild is faster because it has more weight behind it. So I think that there's a super light, mid light, and then just full power. Like these full power bikes, if you want a proper full power bike with a big battery and you're riding it for like enduro riding, just Finale Ligura or enduro type riding, they're all pushing, like when you've put good tires on them, 23.5 at like an ultra lightweight level. Even the Orbea Wild that I built with aluminium rims and downhill tires was 23 point something. And that's like the lightest. And then you go up to 24, 25, 25.5, 26. It's marginal gains in the differences of how they do definitely feel different to ride, but not so much so that I think they're different categories of bikes. So once you've hit this threshold of like 23 kilos, 23 to 25 is nothing to me.
So weight's not quite as critical as maybe some people think. Probably is in the super light category. So therefore, that's why they're more suited to these kind of like more down country starter bikes. Do you think batteries are now big enough that they should just stop making them bigger? Like the biggest 750 watt hours, like do they really need to go bigger? And I mean, follow-on question is, do you think batteries need to be removable considering all of the, the compromises you have to make by having cutting out the front of the tube, or just like, there's a lot more complexity in having a removable battery, and a lot more weight as well as added.
Yeah, I think with the batteries, I think that the energy density per kilo is getting to the absolute limit now. And I think once, like the new SRAM battery is really good. It's using a new type of cell. So it's using a 5.8 milliamp hour cell. So the energy density per kilo is really high. So that 630 watt hour battery weighs 3.1 kilos. So that's a real high energy density. If Bosch can do the same with their 750, if they can replicate those cells, they can bring their battery weight down by like half a kilo at least. So I think that's the limit. And I think that a 750 battery is a really good option. But I do really personally like the removable batteries, because I've been riding 2 battery days. Me and my mates have got, like, lots of us now have 2 batteries, and honestly, we put it in turbo and just blast around on turbo, and you can do like, what did we do the other day? 5,000. I can't remember how many meters. It was many thousands of meters. Wow. And you are toast by the end of it. Like 4,000 meters with 2 batteries, just in full power.
I remember once I went to Sammerberg. It's a little bike park outside of Munich with Henry, and I was towing him up on his normal bike with the tie down, and I went through 3 batteries in a day. It was with the removable battery on the Yamaha one, 500 watt hour, and by halfway through the 3rd battery, I was completely wrecked, and I was like, Henry, I don't know if I can do any more runs. I was already at about 3,500 meters of elevation, towing him. And he's like, Papa, you're so old.
It's like, he's like just getting warmed up.
Yeah, he's just been towed up, like he doesn't have to do anything.
Yeah. I mean, I do hope we still have the removables, because it just makes, like, even traveling is a nightmare if you've got a battery fixed into a bike. It just becomes, basically, if you live on an island like the UK, you can't fly anywhere with a battery and a bike. It's basically impossible. So yeah, more for removable batteries.
Okay, just sticking with the bike for the moment. What do you think brands could do to improve comfort? And what do you think they could do to improve performance? Because they're quite different,
with comfort,
aren't they?
Yeah.
Or are they different?
Comfort. I think comfort for me means there's some quick wins there, I think. So I ride bikes. I'm 6'3". That's 191 centimeters. I get a bike and it's got the same handlebar rise and stem length as a small bike. So for me, I end up like really lurched over the front, because proportionally the stack height has only increased by, I don't know, 5% or something, but I'm 25% different body size compared to somebody that might ride one of those bikes. I'm just pulling those numbers out the air, but I always have to change things like stem length and bar height at a cost to myself. I have to, buy them usually, which is fine for the demo bikes, but I don't think a consumer should have to do that. I think that a manufacturer should be able to put a 40 mil rise on an XL bike and a 10 mil rise on a small bike. And I think that's a big thing with comfort, bar height, all those little simple things, and also chainstay length. There's some brands now that are doing size-specific chainstay lengths, and that makes the bike feel way more balanced and planted. So I've just ridden a bike from Privateer that every single size has a chainstay length relative to the size, every single size, not just 1 or 2 of them. And I think that's really good, because I now I'm naturally more centered on the bike, and I don't have to weight the front and get my body over the front. And to me, that's a more comfortable ride, but also it comes into the performance aspect as well. I find that I can ride the bike a little bit harder with less body language to get it to turn.
So is it speccing? Okay, chainstays that's definitely geometry, but like, is it more about speccing then a higher bar, or is it about changing the geometry at the front of the bike to make a bigger?
Definitely both. I'm having to compensate by not having a high stack by using a higher rise bar, and that does affect things like the reach. And often I'll get a bike on paper that looks like it's got a really long reach, and then you get on it and sit on it, and by the time you've put some spaces underneath and even used a higher rise bar, it feels quite short in comparison, because you're basically altering the effective geometry.
But you know why they
the
don't
bike.
do that? Because every single different part has a different SKU, like a stock keeping unit.
Yeah.
So it just explodes the like the complexity of putting a bike together. You have to order from different suppliers. You have like another item to manage to bring into the production line. So it massively increases complexity, and also you don't have the kind of confidence, I think, a lot of the time that that is necessarily the right thing for the majority of people. Like, I mean, you're definitely you're on the taller side, so yeah, it's pretty clear what your needs are. But is that then the same needs as other people who are buying the same size of bike as you?
Potentially, and I guess that leads on to a third point: is they might not have even tried it, and unless you do, it's really difficult to objectively determine what those differences are. So I think because now I've tried so many that have come with a real low front end, and now I adjust it, I can I guess it's subjectively feel that they feel different to ride. I get the whole thing with the complexity logistically behind it, but again, I think it's an area that when you're spending 10 grand on a bike, if I'm going to put my consumer hat on, I think I'm going to be harsher, I think it's a poor reason for it not to be right.
I would agree. I wonder whether that's like an area where then the dealer can kind of step in and add value,
yeah.
and like bring some
yes.
Value back to actually having a store that you can walk in as opposed to ordering online. Like if a customer comes in, they sit on the bike, they get fitted for the right frame size, and then the dealer can identify, actually, you know what, you would be better off with a higher bar, and then they can kind of like, bring that in as part of the deal when they sell the bike. So you're actually almost incentivizing the dealers.
Yeah, I think to be fair, a lot of good dealers do that. So I'm probably different in that most of my bikes are demo bikes that arrive in boxes. So I probably can't talk to all the people that go to dealers and probably do get their stuff swapped out. Yeah, so that's a real.
I mean, the brands could already they could help that by actually offering the dealers a bunch of different riser bars, just as an extra when they make a big order, just so that they have that kind of flexibility to customize the size of the bikes to the customer.
Yeah.
So, like, what other pain points are there or challenges that e-mountain bike riders face, and how can designers and engineers address these in future iterations of the bikes?
I think pain points are warranty, getting things back up and running when they break. I think things are getting better, but I still think there's a bit of fear when people are buying an e-bike with what if it goes wrong? Because if you do look online, there are many stories of like batteries or motors breaking or electronics failing, and there are people that I think have concerns with that with regards to, if I buy a product, how long might it be if it goes wrong? It's getting much better, and the reliability is getting better, but I think that there's still some ways to go there. What other pain points are there? Pricing is a big part to it.
Would you always advise, like if somebody's asking you for advice on buying a bike, would you always say go to a dealer, or would you also say go online? I mean, of course, if you go online, it's cheaper, but you're sacrificing the ability to have the bike quickly fixed and get back out on the trail, or even customized to you at the point of purchase.
Yeah, it depends. Some people don't want to get a bike online, and they'd much rather have a face-to-face conversation with somebody. But some people, if they only have a budget of £3,000, they might not be able to get a good bike from a dealer. So then potentially the solution is, like we spoke about that Vitus bike earlier, that might be the difference between them riding an e-bike and not riding an e-bike. And then you've got the multi-format retailers like YT and Propane that have got showrooms, but they are direct to consumer. And I think that's a really interesting proposition that they've got going on there, because you can go and get on the bike, you can feel it. They do demo days, but you still order your bike on the internet and it gets delivered. So it'd be interesting to see how that kind of hybrid model, progresses.
You mentioned Garmin earlier about what a faff it is to kind of get that working. Like, I think you could say like Garmin and Apple, they offer a user ride experience, whereas eMTB brands focus on a user bike experience. Considering how big the data sets are that Apple and Garmin have to work with, and like how together with Strava, for example, they are as such a key part of many people's ride experience. They also have data tracking. They have so much more data to work with, so they can optimize their products to a degree that a bike brand is very, it's very hard for them to compete in that respect. So do you think there is any point in brands really trying to compete digitally? And if so, in what way? What should brands focus on for digital ecosystems?
I think there's a big, I see that as the next big leap. Actually, I think the UI, the integration, and all of the software working together. So my experience of going out for a bike ride in a new location, it could be so much better. So what I do is I go onto Trailforks. I look at my local area. Trailforks is an amazing repository of information mapping people's rides, and I'll find a local route or one that a magazine's recommended. And in order to follow that, I have to go through this kind of funky process of downloading it on my laptop, logging onto Garmin's thing, sending it over to my watch or Garmin head unit, and then I've got a bike with two screens on it. So I've got the Bosch one and then the Garmin screen. And it's a really convoluted way of riding the bike. And we've got some of this tech built into it already. So I think a lot of the bikes have got screens on them. Certainly a lot of the Bosch ones have. But I still don't think they're yet at the point where you can just go and download a ride onto your bike. What I would love would be able to have an app, Trailforks, and it says that here's your route. It's a 30k loop, 2,000 meters of climbing, send to bike, just like you do on your car, right? So you can do that now on a lot of cars. You can find it on a map, and I can send it to my car, and I get in my car, and the route will be there. I want that to happen on a bike, so I can send it to the bike. It goes on. I get on the bike, and it's already got it mapped out. It'll tell me how much battery I'll have at the end of the ride, loads of different things about the ride, and then it will just send it to Strava at the end. It's kind of, I can see some brands starting to try and do something similar, but it's still a long way off. I think the software side and the way that they talk to each other needs to be much better.
There's not really any brands that have complete control over their digital ecosystems. I think Highbike was one of the only ones who actually really went far down that route with the Fly-On, which clearly didn't work out as well as they were hoping. So it's at the moment, all of the power to do that is in the hands of Bosch and SRAM and Yamaha and Fazua and these other brands. So it would be interesting to see if they do that. There's some discussion around like universal motor housings. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea. I think I see it from commercially, like a brand might want to protect their property by having their own unique housing, because then they can sell more of theirs potentially. But I think if I guess it's similar to the universal derailleur housing. It makes the end consumers experience so much better. But if they're going to do that, would you be able to buy a motor on its own and then retrofit it to your bike? Because that's the only thing that I thought, if that happens, like, how would you then buy a new Shimano motor? Because I don't think any of the brands sell them to the end consumer. But I think for manufacturing and design and streamlining that process, it does make sense.
There's a whole business model there, isn't there? Like an aftermarket motor with kind of like a modular housing attachment system, so you could kind of retrofit any bike when your battery and motor are out of date. It'd be quite interesting.
Yeah, that's actually what I thought SRAM might do. With they bought out their motor recently. I thought that they might have some kind of aftermarket motor system that would slot into the Levo. I thought that was a small possibility that might happen. When I saw the rumored pictures of the Levo with the SRAM kind of bros motor, I thought that they were going to just develop yeah.
Do you have a clear favorite motor at the moment?
Do you know what? I think I do, but then I ride the other motors and I'm like, actually, this is really good. Honestly. Yeah. So when I do notice it more when I'm riding with a group of mates. So as an example, if we're all on the Bosch system, everyone operates at the same level, the battery and the range is pretty much identical. If I then get on a Shimano bike, I find even though I've got the same battery, I don't quite get the same amount of range. And they go a little bit quicker than me on the uphills because it seems like the Bosch has a little bit more power. But when I'm riding it solo, I'm not as bothered. But when I buy a bike, I'll be like, right, I'm going to do loads of rides with my mates, so therefore I want the one that is just as competitive as everybody else's. So therefore I'd probably pick the Bosch. I don't know if that answers the question, but I guess
I mean, since you ride everything, you definitely have to stay open as well to the pros and cons of every system. I ride Fazua motor quite often, well, always now actually, on my high bike like model, and I go with people on full power Bosch bikes, and I'm going to keep up. Like, you know, sometimes on some climbs a little bit slower, but for the most part, you can just go riding together no matter what e-bike motor you have.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I don't think it matters as much as people might think.
Other than in a race context, like, of course, then it does make a difference. What do you think about the R motor, the Bosch race motor with the little extra boost, 3-second boost after you stop pedaling? Do you think that's something that other brands should incorporate?
Bafang have. So their new motor actually has that. It's very similar in the characteristic. I think it adds it's certainly a different experience to riding. So I've got a bike with that race motor in, and you can do stuff on it that you wouldn't be able to do on a normal e-bike. So it's almost like e-bike with a tiny, tiny little plus on the end, because you can use it to get over things that would be much more difficult. So it's almost like the Fazua that you're riding is a very natural bike feeling, so natural ride experience. Like, if we're looking at on an analog to digital scale, like yours is very much like an analog feeling, I think anyway. Still got some override in there. You can still have the boost, whereas the Bosch race mode is very digital. It's like very on off and stop start. So it's a different ride experience.
It's definitely not for beginners. I mean, there's so many videos out there of just people getting whiskey throttle, like beginners on motocross bikes, and they're like ding 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 ding, and they let out their clutch and they're just like whap. It's probably the same with the Bosch race motor. If you put a beginner cyclist on it and they do a pedal stroke and their bike just goes off after them. So.
Yeah.
So I asked you before, but the connection cut out. Where's the best place you've ever ridden? Where's your favorite place to ride bikes?
It's funny because I think some of it comes down to who you're riding with and your experience at the time. But I love places like, or I say places like, there's not many places like it. So I'll say Finale Ligura is an amazing place because it's all like part of the community. Bikers are accepted everywhere. You get to the bottom, go for a rest. You can go to a restaurant in your bike gear, and it's just a really cool biking community there with some amazing trails. So that's the place that I would really like to go back to as much as I possibly could, because all of that together, I think that makes your biking experience really good. And the other place is the Surrey Hills, because it's my local and the trails are short. They're okay, but you can connect so many trails together and have a day out and have a really good day out that doesn't really matter that it's not the best biking landscape in the world.
It's interesting that
still have a really good day.
Like you say that because I mean you have ridden in so many great places, also big mountains with like thousands and thousands of meters of descent. But it's a little bit like that in Hamburg as well. The trails are kind of like the Surrey Hills, and the biggest peak is like 116 meters. But in a day you'll do like well over 1,000 meters of elevation, and you're just constantly up and down, up and down, up and down. And there are trails everywhere. It's a massive trail network in Harburger Berge with a very kind of active community of people like, building the trails, fixing the trails, making new trails. And it's, I also love riding here. I never thought Hamburg would be a e-mountain bike destination, but it's surprisingly good.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it. If you can get 1,000 meters of elevation and spend a good few hours riding, and there's some good trails that will challenge you and challenge the bike, then winner. The funny thing is with places like that and the Surrey Hills is we'll go away to some amazing locations and some epic, like really lucky to be on some of those press trips that they always choose some amazing places. And people will say, "Where are you from?" And you'll say Surrey Hills, and they go, "Oh, wow, it's supposed to be amazing there." And you're like, "It is, dude, but look at what we're at here. This is like so epic." So it's funny. I think there's some amazing riders from that place, like Ollie Wilkins, Brendan Fairclough, and Bernard Kerr that have really represented that area really well.
Certainly, even Sam Pilgrim. I've ridden there with Sam, and
Sam,
and
yeah.
I've ridden there with you, and it was both trips were excellent. You run a forum, right? So there must be a lot of active users in there, and with all the videos you make, there must be a lot of comments. So, are there any like really funny or bizarre like conversations that you've seen over the years?
Yeah, it's such a diverse community, which is fantastic to see all these people from all over the world. I don't know how many members there are. There must be like 20, 30,000 members, and I don't know how many posts there are. But it's fascinating. There's a real diverse group of people, from total newbies to people that are buying their first e-bike to people that are ex racers and stuff that are on there. So it is interesting. I'm pretty sure you've been on there as well, and you can see like different comments on different bikes, and it's just like it's a bit like a Reddit for bicycles, really, a Reddit for e-bikes. So yeah, I don't think there's anything that stands out that I could say that's super funny, but it's just when you start to realize certain characters and all you know of them is their avatar and their username. So that's all you ever know. And then you can spot patterns of little jokes that they'll make and things. So
how many members of the bike industry are active on there?
Probably loads. Probably loads. Like, yeah.
Some brands
GDPR and all that.
But you're pretty sure that some brands are active on there.
I guarantee you that they are. Yeah. In fact, some do it publicly. So TQ went on there when they released their bike. Specialized went on there as well. So a lot of brands do it publicly to almost like what is it? When you release a new product, it's like that early field failure analysis. So you want to capture when you shift 5,000 products on day one, you want to find out if anything's going to go wrong. So I think that's a good place to take a look.
Just what do you think the temperature is in terms of like how consumers feel brands are responding to their, to their needs? Like, are they?
I think there's. I don't know. I think Specialized did a really good job in going onto the forum and creating an account, and they took a lot of flack. Do you remember when the Levo had the problem with lots of motors went wrong? They were there in the thick of that, and they were taking probably hundreds of comments and private messages a day to try and help people out. And I thought that was a really good use of that resource to actually go and say, look, we know shit's hitting the fan, we're here to help. And then it becomes less of just a corporation, and there's a bit of a personal side behind it when they get to speak to the people in the rider care team and they get a name from them. And then I think there's a bit more of a connection built there.
It diffuses the situation. The most frustrating thing for people is not being heard. They have a problem and they cannot get hold of anybody. So yeah.
Going back to the Apple thing, they called it, they had specific terms for different things like that. And they sound quite like cheesy, but it was called repairing relationships, and that's what there's entire teams of people that their goal is to repair relationships with customers, and it's a really important part to business, especially with bigger corporations, when it becomes a little bit harder to have a bit of a personal identity instead of a corporate identity.
We've touched on it already, but what advice would you offer to the bike industry as a whole?
I think that what frustrates people is when they buy a bike and it's outdated so quickly. And I think it's even more so in the electric bike world. And it's a really tough one because as a bike brand, you really want to protect your intellectual property and what's coming out in the future. And you want people to buy new bikes. So I see that part, but there's nothing worse as a consumer buying a product and then realizing that actually you've just spent many thousands of pounds and it's been superseded so quickly without an upgrade path. So let me give you an example. Bosch changed from a non-smart system to a smart system. So everybody that bought a Trek rail within a certain time period, months later found out that nothing was compatible. None of the new batteries were compatible. None of the new screens were compatible. And it would have been very hard on Bosch to announce that because you risk cannibalizing your existing sales. But I think that people are really wary of that. And actually, going back to the forum piece, I see a lot of people saying, I'm not going to spend £5,000 on a new bike because it's going to be out of date within a year. So some kind of, wouldn't it be great if you can buy a new bike? Oh, I've lost you. You there?
Yeah, I'm here. You froze for a second.
Well, sorry. Wouldn't it be great if you could buy a new bike and then you almost have this promise note that you're going to be able to upgrade everything on that bicycle for 5 years, including motor and battery.
Yeah.
Whereas now you can't. Anything you buy, like if I bought a bike today, maybe it will be out of date in 1 year. Who knows if Shimano will bring out an EP9 or Bosch will bring out a Gen whatever it's on now.
Do you think that's holding back people from buying bikes?
I think if people
or does it
bike,
offer opportunity because you get like heavily discounted, almost new products, which are still very, very good.
Yeah, but I think the reason we're in that situation is there's lots of factors that have generated that situation of really cheap bikes. But I like traditionally with a mountain bike, if you bought a bike in 2010, you could pretty much upgrade everything on that bike for 10 years.
That's true.
You could have bought a new Lyric fork or a new set of Code brakes or a Fox coil or a new set of tires. And the only real standard that changed was 26 to 29, really. Maybe longer travel.
Loads of bikes with purple and green anodized parts all and then blue anodized parts on them.
Yeah, but now, like if you look at an e-bike from 2018 and one from 2023, just three years, we might have gone through 3 different generations of motor system or different types of battery or external mounted batteries to internal. So yeah, that's been the pace of change. And I think it is concerning to people not wanting to be outdated so quickly.
I mean, that's also problematic, not just for the consumer, but also for the industry itself, because they're investing a lot of R&D money and a lot into supply chain and building a lot of bikes, which they then have on stock. And if they don't clear the stock, their stock is very quickly obsolete. So
yeah,
I don't know what the solution is to that. What do you think?
I think it's been a real difficult one because there's been a bit of an arms race to bring out a big battery bike with it all integrated, and the market was so ripe to selling e-bikes over the past few years that I think it was a race to get the product out as quickly as possible with the latest generation of kit on it in order to maximize capital and sell the most amount of bikes. And consumers bought it. So consumers demanded it and bike brands made it.
What do you think about...
But I do think...
Sorry, go on.
No, it's fine. I was just going to reiterate, I do think there's opportunity to have a bit more longevity in each bike frame.
I mean, you do test all the latest and greatest products. So do you think like the new Axis system, wireless shifting, do you think that is really a massive step forward, or do you just think people don't really need it?
I think that everything is a marginal gain once you hit a certain level of component.
Even the new Axis wireless system. So
the transmission is better than the previous transmission Axis, but it's not like so night and day different. You can still shift really well on the previous generation Axis. The new one does it better, and you can shift under load, and it's pretty clean. Aesthetically, it looks really good. I think the design of it's really nice. But I don't think, if you're talking performance-wise, it's probably very little in it, if anything. And the same with the cable actuated. Like I've got a bike with the Shimano XT shifter and SLX cassette, and it just works really well. Really, really well. Mm-hmm. And it costs a fraction of the price of the SRAM stuff, but the SRAM stuff is brilliant in its operation. I
love it, but I get frustrated when you set out and you realize that your battery's dead or almost dead. It's happened quite often. That's definitely a downside.
Yeah, the new e-bikes take the power from the motor. So they take it from, there's a plug on the motor and it has a dummy battery. So it's all cabled. So it's kind of like a wireless but cable for the power. But I think that once you hit this certain level of kit, that it's very minimal improvements. Like, you're not going to go faster, I don't think, if you have transmission.
As someone who appreciates both technology and the great outdoors, how do you balance the benefits of digital connectivity with the need to unplug and connect with nature?
Yeah, it's a tough one, because some of the best bike rides I've had are, I don't even put my knee pads on. I just put helmet on. I'll leave my phone and I just go and ride the bike. But sometimes when I'm out, I'll have my phone on me. I have my Garmin on me. I'll be conscious of my battery, and I've got all this stuff just giving me data that actually, if you really whittle it down, it's what's the point? It's kind of it's all there, that I might look at it when I get back, but actually, does it improve my ride, or does it not? Because some of my best rides are just, I'll put my bike shoes on, my helmet, go and cycle up to the forest and just ride aimlessly.
But still on an e-bike.
Always on an e-bike.
Do you think there's any place for a non-e-bike?
For me, no, but for lots of people, yes.
For me, no, as well. In the city, yes, but
No.
like out on the trails, I really don't see the point anymore. Like, if you want to have a lightweight bike, just get a lightweight e-bike.
Yeah, I think they're boring even on the flat stuff.
Unless you have an uplift. But if you have an uplift, then okay, then it's a different different topic.
Yeah. I think with the SLs, actually, going back to those, it does almost make a regular pedal bike, other than the cost to get one. Like, why would you buy a regular pedal bike over one that's got a Fazua motor or a SL motor?
Exactly, totally agree. So, Rob, any last thoughts? I think we're about an hour. I'll have to cut it, I guess, somehow, since we had a bit of a technical interruption. But yeah, any last thoughts? Anything you'd like to say to anybody in the industry or any of your followers? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a fascinating few years, and seeing what comes out of the design studios and the engineering teams. It's been absolutely amazing, and well done for everybody's work, because it's truly changing people's lives. Like, the amount of people that I get a lot of messages from people that say it has actually changed my life. I can now ride with my partner, or as a guy that I rode with that lost a limb, sadly, and he can now ride because he has an e-bike. It is literally life-changing for lots of people, and e-bikes are an enabler of that. So massive well done to everyone that's been involved, and excited to see where the next few years go. There's oh man, if we catch up in 3 or 4 years, things are going to look the same but really different, I think.
You sound very optimistic.
What about you from an insider, because you're in the industry? Do any of my answers to your questions
I just can't answer that because I'm an insider. I can answer it maybe at dinner, but yeah, it's there's a lot of exciting things going on. I think that the consumers are in for a treat in the future. I think that, like you say, that I was having a conversation the other day with somebody who was kind of like pretty negative about like the time that we're living in right now. And I was just saying, look, think about people in the past. They never experienced e-mountain bikes. Like, even a king with all the money in the world, all the riches of the world, ruling over all the lands, he never experienced how cool it is to get on an e-mountain bike, pedal up to the top of the hill and bomb it back down. Like, we're very lucky. Like,
I know. And as much as I've given some criticism, I think that you're absolutely right. Like, me and Paul went to Glentress in Scotland a few weeks ago, and we did one of the Bosch events there. And there was a guy that had been cycling for 5 days in a row in Scotland in lots of different locations on an old school mountain bike. And we went past him about 3 or 4 times, and we stopped at the top, and he said, "Oh, I'm really interested in one of those bikes." And we got chatted to him, as you do, and he'd never, ever had a go on one, ever. And he's always looked at them, and he's been a keen biker, and he had a go on one, and he was blown away, absolutely blown away. And there are thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of that person still out there that have never been on an e-bike.
Yeah.
So, and it blows people away the very first time.
100%. You feel like Superman or Superwoman. It's like a superpower getting on an e-bike for sure. Awesome. Rob, thanks so much for the chat. It's been great to talk, and hopefully we meet up on the trails relatively soon.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.